Hello, Taurus, Sun, Moon, Rising, and Venus. Welcome, and welcome to all of my cross-watchers as well. I'm so grateful that you're here today. As always, take what resonates and leave the rest. Every reading has a way of finding the people who need to hear it at just the right moment. And it feels like if these cards have found you today, there may be something your heart has quietly known for a long time, but perhaps hasn't been ready to admit until now. The first card that immediately catches my attention is Death. Don't let the name of this card pull you into fear. What I'm sensing isn't an ending that arrives suddenly. It feels much quieter than that. It feels like something you've been carrying for months, maybe even years, has finally become too heavy to keep holding. Taurus. I keep feeling this image of someone standing outside a house they've built with their own hands. Every brick reminds them of the effort they invested. Every wall carries memories. Yet somewhere deep inside, they already know they don't belong there anymore. You've always been someone who takes responsibility seriously. When you promise something, you stay. When people depend on you, you show up. Even when you're exhausted. Even when nobody notices how much you've sacrificed. That's what keeps coming through so strongly. It seems like you've spent a long season building, fixing, supporting, holding everything together. Maybe you've convinced yourself that if you just worked a little harder, loved a little deeper, or stayed a little longer, eventually things would feel lighter. But they haven't. The Eight of Pentacles appears. And I almost feel your energy pouring into every corner of your life. Work, family, relationships, personal goals. You just keep going. It's almost automatic. Other people may see determination when they look at you, but underneath that determination, there may be a quiet tiredness that very few people truly understand. Yeah. It feels like you've become so used to carrying everything that you've forgotten what it feels like to put something down. Then, I see the Four of Cups reversed, and something shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, more like the first deep breath after walking through a storm for far too long. I keep sensing that you're beginning to notice opportunities you couldn't see before, not necessarily because the world suddenly changed, but because your heart is slowly becoming willing to look in another direction. There may be moments recently where you've surprised yourself. Maybe you said no when you normally would have said yes. Maybe you stopped chasing someone's approval. Maybe you simply sat in silence and realized that protecting your own peace isn't selfish after all. Oh my God, for some of you, that realization alone changes everything. The interesting thing is that this doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like growing up emotionally. It feels like recognizing that not every responsibility belongs to you. Not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not every dream you once held still belongs in your future. I keep hearing someone whisper inside your spirit, "I'm tired." Not tired of life. Just tired of constantly carrying what no longer feels aligned. There's a difference. The Death card stays here quietly, almost patiently, reminding me that some chapters don't end because they failed. Sometimes they end because they've already taught you everything they were meant to teach. It seems like this chapter has reached that point. You don't have to force the ending. You may simply find yourself no longer fighting to keep it alive. Then, almost unexpectedly, the Fool steps into the reading. I love the timing of this, because it doesn't rush you, it doesn't demand immediate action. Instead, it gently reminds you that somewhere beyond everything you're releasing is space. Space for curiosity, space for breathing again, space for discovering who Taurus becomes when life is no longer built entirely around obligation. Perhaps you've forgotten what excitement feels like. Perhaps you've become so focused on surviving that you've stopped imagining what thriving could actually look like. Yet these cards keep suggesting that something inside you is beginning to wake up, slowly, naturally, almost like the first sunlight appearing before anyone realizes the night is ending. I wouldn't be surprised if, over the coming days or weeks, You notice yourself thinking differently, not because someone convinced you to change, but because your own heart quietly begins choosing peace over pressure, authenticity over obligation, and your own well-being over carrying burdens that were never truly yours. Something tells me this is only the beginning of that journey, because once one door quietly closes inside your soul, another has a chance to appear where you least expect it. And that next doorway, it seems to be holding a completely different kind of opportunity, one that feels much more aligned with the future you're slowly growing into. It feels like the energy begins to stretch beyond the familiar Taurus, almost as if you're standing at the edge of a quiet field just before sunrise, realizing there is far more land ahead of you than there is behind you. I keep sensing that you're looking farther into the distance than you have in a very long time. Not because you suddenly have every answer, but because your heart is becoming curious again. Curiosity has a very different energy than obligation, and that's exactly what these cards seem to be inviting into your life. The first card resting here is the Ace of Pentacles, and I couldn't help but smile when it appeared. This doesn't feel loud or dramatic. It feels subtle. It may begin as an email you almost ignore, a conversation you weren't expecting, a simple idea that keeps returning to your mind while you're making coffee one morning. Yeah, sometimes the biggest shifts don't knock on the front door. They quietly wait until you're finally willing to notice them. The interesting thing is that whatever this opportunity represents, it doesn't seem rushed. I actually feel the opposite. It carries the kind of steady energy that Taurus naturally trusts, something that grows one layer at a time. Something that allows strong roots to form before anyone even notices what's happening above the surface. Perhaps that's why you've been asked to slow down emotionally. You may be preparing for something that needs patience more than speed. The Two of Wands keeps pulling my attention toward a horizon you've never explored before. I almost see you standing with one hand on the life you've always known, and the other reaching toward something unfamiliar. It isn't that you're dissatisfied with everything you've built. It simply feels like you've begun asking yourself a different question. Instead of asking, "Can I survive here?" you may be wondering, "Can I truly thrive somewhere else?" That is a very different conversation to have with yourself. I keep feeling that some of you have been quietly dreaming about changing careers, expanding a business, learning a new skill, moving somewhere different, or finally saying yes to an opportunity you've talked yourself out of before. Even if none of those situations describe you exactly, there still seems to be a doorway opening where your confidence has room to grow. The beautiful part is that you don't have to become a completely different person to walk through it. The Fool appears again, but the energy feels softer this time. Less about taking a leap and more about trusting your own footsteps. I wouldn't be surprised if you notice yourself becoming less afraid of making the perfect decision. Perhaps you're beginning to understand that every meaningful journey starts before certainty arrives. That's something I think many Taurus souls wrestle with. You like knowing the ground beneath your feet is solid before taking the next step. These cards seem to whisper something different. They seem to say that sometimes the ground becomes solid because you were brave enough to keep walking. Oh my God. I just had this image of someone planting a tiny seed in the middle of an enormous field. Anyone passing by might laugh, because all they can see is a patch of dirt. They don't see what that seed will become months from now. They don't understand what patience creates. That's exactly how this opportunity feels. Small enough to overlook, powerful enough to reshape your future if you continue nurturing it. Then the King of Wands steps forward with an energy that feels incredibly encouraging. This doesn't necessarily feel like another person, although for some of you, it certainly could be. It may also represent a version of yourself that's becoming stronger, more decisive, more willing to lead instead of waiting for permission. I keep sensing that your voice carries more weight than you realize. Your experience matters. The lessons you've collected over the years weren't wasted. They may become the very foundation of what you're building next. Perhaps you'll even surprise yourself by saying yes to something you would have declined a year ago. Maybe you'll notice that fear no longer gets the final vote. Maybe confidence doesn't arrive all at once, but quietly grows every time you honor your own intuition instead of your old doubts. There's also something deeply comforting about this energy. It doesn't feel like you're chasing success anymore. It feels like you're slowly becoming the kind of person success naturally wants to follow. The pace may still be steady, but the direction seems much clearer than before. I keep sensing that this path has more to reveal than financial growth alone. Because once your external world begins shifting, another conversation starts unfolding beneath the surface. One that asks whether everything you've been giving your energy to still reflects the life you're hoping to create. That question seems ready to uncover something you may not have fully noticed until these next cards begin speaking. There comes a quiet moment when even the strongest soul begins asking a different kind of question. Not, how much more can I accomplish? But, how much of myself have I left behind while accomplishing everything else? Taurus, that question feels incredibly present in this part of the reading. It isn't arriving with judgment. It feels more like an invitation to notice the places where your own well-being has slowly slipped into the background, while everything else kept demanding your attention. The first card lying here is Temperance reversed, and the atmosphere changes immediately. I keep sensing a scale that has been leaning to one side for much longer than anyone realized. Maybe you've been giving 90% of your energy away while trying to survive on the 10% you kept for yourself. Maybe you've become so familiar with being tired that exhaustion started feeling normal. Yeah, sometimes we adapt to imbalance without even noticing we're doing it. I almost see someone sitting at their kitchen table long after everyone else has gone to bed. The house is quiet. The phone finally stops buzzing. The to-do list is still sitting there, unfinished, and yet your body has nothing left to give. You stare out the window for a moment, wondering when life became something you were constantly trying to catch up with, instead of something you were actually living. That image feels important. Because the Eight of Pentacles appears again, but this time I don't see determination first. I see repetition. I see someone waking up, working, solving problems, carrying responsibilities, falling asleep, and waking up to do it all over again. There is nothing wrong with dedication. Taurus has always known how to build something meaningful, but I keep sensing that somewhere along the journey, your own heart stopped receiving the same care you were giving to everything else. I wouldn't be surprised if you've recently caught yourself feeling strangely emotional over something very small. Maybe someone asked if you were okay, and you almost didn't know how to answer. Maybe you walked outside one morning, felt the breeze on your face, and realized how long it had been since you simply paused. Those little moments sometimes reveal more than the biggest conversations. The Five of Swords carries an energy that feels surprisingly internal. Rather than pointing toward conflict with another person, it seems to reveal the conversations you've been having inside your own mind. One voice keeps saying, you should push harder, stay longer, fix one more problem. Another voice, much quieter, keeps asking for rest. It keeps asking for peace. It keeps asking to be heard. Oh my God. Isn't it interesting how often we believe we have to earn the right to slow down? These cards don't seem to agree with that belief. It feels like life is gently reminding you that peace isn't supposed to be a reward you receive after surviving endless pressure. Perhaps peace is meant to become part of the way you build your future. That realization alone could begin changing the direction of everything. The King of Wands enters with a completely different presence. I almost imagine someone standing tall, not because life became easier, but because they've stopped carrying what doesn't belong to them. Confidence feels different when it isn't built on proving yourself. It becomes quieter, more grounded, more natural. I keep sensing that this version of you isn't rushing to impress anyone. There's no desperate need for approval anymore. Instead, there seems to be a calm understanding that your energy is valuable, and where you choose to invest it truly matters. Perhaps success begins looking different as well. Instead of measuring yourself by how busy you are, you may begin measuring your life by how fulfilled you feel at the end of the day. Instead of asking whether you've done enough, you may start asking whether what you're doing still reflects the person you're becoming. Those are powerful questions, Taurus. Questions that don't always produce immediate answers, but they often lead to lasting change. I keep sensing that your body, your intuition, and your spirit are all trying to move back into the same rhythm. Not perfectly. Life rarely asks for perfection. Just honestly. One choice at a time. One boundary at a time. One peaceful breath at a time. Something tells me that this renewed balance isn't only preparing you for a healthier life, it also seems to be creating space for something tangible to arrive, an opportunity that carries both stability and reward. As these next cards begin revealing themselves, the energy shifts once again, and it feels as though the work you've quietly invested may finally be ready to meet the abundance it has been growing toward. It feels like the atmosphere begins to brighten in a very grounded way, Taurus. Not with fireworks or dramatic surprises, but with the quiet confidence that comes when something you've been nurturing beneath the surface finally begins to show signs of life. I keep sensing someone standing in a garden early in the morning, looking at the first small green shoots breaking through the soil. To anyone else, they might seem insignificant, but to the person who planted those seeds, they mean everything. They are proof that patient effort is finally becoming something visible. The first card here is the Ace of Pentacles, and its presence feels incredibly reassuring. This doesn't seem like luck appearing out of nowhere. It feels earned. It feels connected to choices you've been making little by little, even during moments when you wondered if any of it would truly matter. Perhaps this opportunity arrives through work you've already been doing. Perhaps it comes from someone recognizing your consistency. Or maybe it's simply the universe placing a doorway in front of you after watching how faithfully you've kept moving forward. Yeah, there is something beautiful about opportunities that don't need to shout in order to change your life. I keep sensing that money, stability, or a practical breakthrough may begin unfolding in ways that feel surprisingly natural. Instead of chasing every possibility, you may notice one particular path continuing to draw your attention. It doesn't seem complicated. It actually feels quite simple. Almost as if your intuition already knows where your next step belongs, before your mind has fully caught up. Still, the energy isn't completely quiet. The Five of Wands enters the reading, and immediately, I become aware of movement around you. Different opinions, different personalities, different people all reaching towards something similar. It wouldn't surprise me if you find yourself in an environment where competition becomes more noticeable than it used to be. Perhaps someone questions your decisions. Perhaps another person seems strangely distant after hearing good news about your progress. Sometimes success has a way of revealing emotions in others that were hidden while everything felt equal. Oh my God. I don't actually think everyone is competing with you. It almost feels like some people are quietly comparing their journey to yours without ever telling you they're doing it. That comparison can create tension, even when you've done nothing wrong. These cards seem to encourage you not to carry other people's projections. You don't have to explain why you're growing. You don't have to apologize for opportunities you've worked incredibly hard to receive. Taurus has never been someone who enjoys unnecessary conflict anyway. I keep sensing that your greatest strength here may be your ability to remain focused while everyone else becomes distracted by noise. The King of Wands appears with a steady presence, almost like someone walking into a room without needing to announce themselves. Confidence doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes, confidence simply continues showing up every day. That's the energy surrounding you. It feels like your experience is beginning to speak louder than your doubts ever could. Then, something catches my attention. The Queen of Wands arrives beside the King, and together, they create an energy that feels balanced rather than divided. For some of you, this may point toward an important partnership, someone who believes in your vision or encourages you to keep moving forward. For others, it feels much more internal. It's as though different parts of yourself are finally learning to work together instead of pulling in opposite directions. Your practical side and your creative side, your cautious nature and your growing confidence, your patience and your ambition. That's a powerful combination. I keep feeling that you're no longer trying to become someone else in order to succeed. You're simply allowing more of your authentic self to be seen. There's a huge difference between those two things. Authentic confidence tends to last much longer because it doesn't depend on constant approval. I also keep sensing recognition. Perhaps your efforts begin receiving attention from people you never expected. Maybe someone notices the quality of your work. Maybe a financial door opens because another person quietly trusts your reliability. It seems like respect is becoming part of the reward, not just material success. Whatever unfolds, these cards gently remind you to keep your eyes on what you're building instead of what everyone else appears to be building. Comparison has a way of stealing joy from moments that deserve to be celebrated. Your path has always carried its own rhythm, Taurus, and it still does. As the energy settles, something even softer begins to emerge beneath all of these practical changes. Because while your outer world may be finding greater stability, another part of your heart seems ready to speak. The next cards carry an emotional presence that feels deeply personal, almost as though someone who has remained quietly connected to your story is finally finding the courage to step closer. It feels like the room grows quieter as these final cards settle onto the table. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full of unspoken emotions. Taurus, I keep sensing that someone has been carrying your name in their heart much longer than they've allowed themselves to admit. Whether they've spoken those feelings out loud, or kept them hidden behind pride, timing, or circumstance, the emotional thread between you doesn't seem as distant as it may appear on the surface. The first card that shines here is the Ten of Cups, and it carries such a gentle warmth. I don't see perfection. I don't see a fairy tale. I see something much more meaningful than that. I see someone imagining what life could feel like if they were finally able to stop pretending they don't care. Perhaps they've pictured ordinary moments more than grand romantic gestures. Sharing a quiet dinner, laughing over something completely unimportant, sitting together in comfortable silence. Those simple images often reveal feelings that words struggle to express. Yeah. Sometimes love isn't measured by how loudly someone speaks. Sometimes it's measured by how often they imagine a future where you're still there. The energy surrounding the Hierophant feels surprisingly steady. It doesn't seem interested in temporary excitement or passing attention. I keep sensing someone who longs for something real, something lasting, whether this person is already part of your life or someone whose path naturally reconnects with yours. The intention feels sincere. There seems to be a quiet hope that one day circumstances will allow a stronger foundation to be built. Of course, life has a way of placing complicated chapters between people. The Five of Cups appears almost like a memory that still lingers in the corner of the room. I keep sensing regret, but not necessarily because of one dramatic event. It feels more like the accumulation of moments left unsaid. Conversations delayed, feelings hidden, opportunities that slipped by, while both hearts were waiting for the perfect time. Oh my God. Isn't it interesting how often people wait until they're certain before speaking? only to realize certainty never actually arrives. Perhaps this person has replayed old conversations more times than you would ever imagine. Maybe they've wondered whether one different choice could have changed everything. It seems like they carry questions without easy answers. Questions that only become louder during quiet evenings or unexpected reminders of you. The Eight of Swords creates an energy that feels less like distance and more like hesitation. I don't actually feel that love has disappeared. If anything, it seems emotions are still present, but tangled inside uncertainty. There may be fears about saying the wrong thing, fears about rejection, fears that too much time has already passed. Sometimes people become trapped inside stories they tell themselves, believing it's safer to remain silent than to risk discovering the truth. I wouldn't be surprised if you've sensed this hesitation yourself, even without fully understanding where it comes from. What feels especially important is that these cards don't ask you to chase anyone. They don't ask you to solve another person's emotional puzzle. Instead, they keep drawing my attention back to you, to the calm you've been creating within yourself, to the confidence you've slowly been rebuilding, to the peaceful foundation you've been laying, one quiet choice at a time. It almost feels as though your own healing becomes the invitation, not because it guarantees any particular outcome, but because peace has a remarkable way of attracting connections that can meet it with the same honesty. I keep seeing an image of two roads that once drifted apart, yet never completely disappeared from each other's horizon. Whether those paths eventually cross again or continue teaching different lessons, there seems to be something meaningful about trusting the timing instead of trying to control it. Taurus has always understood the value of patience, even during seasons when patience felt incredibly difficult. So perhaps the message resting beneath all of these cards is simpler than it first appears. Continue becoming the person you've been growing into. Continue honoring your boundaries, your dreams, your quiet moments of joy, and the future you're carefully building. The opportunities surrounding your work, your stability, and even your heart seem to be unfolding at their own natural pace. I have a feeling this isn't really the end of your story at all. It feels much more like the moment where one chapter gently closes, leaving just enough space for another to begin writing itself in ways you may not fully see yet. Until that next page reveals itself, keep listening to what your own heart has been trying to tell you all along.